Hello and welcome to the Conflict Skills Podcast. I'm your host, professional mediator Simon Good. This podcast is designed to help you develop the skills and confidence for dealing with conflict. And in the episode today, I'm actually going to be answering a question that I was sent. So it was from Megan. I won't include any other details, but they were talking about some tension or a strained relationship with someone that they worked with. It sounded like Megan was in an acting team leader role, so had gone from being this person's peer at the same level, working within the team with them, to effectively being their boss, their team leader. And I assume from what they've written that this hadn't been a short-term thing. It might be a few months at least. What they described was that from right when this change happened and they became team leader, things starting to go downhill. What they talked about was the other person, let's just call them Jackie. It's a different name, but we'll go with Jackie. Just being really defensive and irritable. Like every time Megan made a suggestion, Jackie would sort of jump down her throat, was the words that she used. And what I wanted to talk about, and I think what the question was really about, was how can we recover from this kind of a negative downward spiral? I've talked about this in a previous episode, this reciprocal antagonistic spiral pattern that can develop when people are in conflict and how we can reset. And so I thought this might be a good way to just talk about a simple practical framework that we can use to get things back on track. If you've noticed that there's tension or strain within a relationship, someone else seems to be upset about something, it's, well, how can we almost stop this from continuing to decline and turn the page in the relationships, to shift the focus towards the future? So I suppose the way that we would set up a conversation would depend on the context. If it's at work, you might schedule a calendar meeting. It's a personal relationship. It might just be saying, hey, there's something I want to talk to you about. Are you free later? I usually suggest it's better to set the topic on the table, at least to some extent. Like, hey, I just want to talk about things that are coming up over the next couple of months. Make sure we're on the same page. Are you free later if we just go through it together for a few minutes? Or you could say something like, I'd like to talk about how things have been between us lately. And just leave it at that. You don't have to do it now, but maybe I was hoping we could find a time later to touch base. And then once you reach the point where you're beginning the conversation, the first step is to name it in a neutral and mutual way. So you might say something like, hey, I guess the thing I wanted to talk to you about was how things have been between us lately. So it's this mutual aspect. I want to talk about the relationship between us. And then finding a neutral way to phrase it. I wouldn't say you've seemed grumpy. I would say something like maybe it feels like there's been a bit of tension between us. Or you might say something like, it feels like we haven't had the same connection that we normally do. Or it feels like we've been going in different directions and probably both of us have been trying to pull the other person along to where we thought, was the best fit for the team. So this is the neutral way of phrasing it. It's just there's tension between us. I'm not implying critique or judgment, and I'm certainly not doing it in a way that it's your fault. I'm trying to say I want to talk about how things are between us. I'd like to talk about our working relationship. I'd like to talk about how we make decisions within the team. I'd like to talk about our meetings that we co-facilitate. It's like just finding that neutral and mutual way to phrase it. I want to talk about how things have been, that things seem like a little bit tense. The second step is to take responsibility or apologize. So I would often suggest saying something like, look, I know I might have come across as whatever. I know I might have come across as unreasonable over the past couple of weeks, or I probably have come across as not as supportive or warm as I normally would be. Maybe I've come across as a little bit distant or overly critical or acting a bit unreasonable, or you've probably felt that my behavior has been a bit erratic. It's just hypothetically like saying I might have come across and then choosing an actual negative thing like a bit judgmental or critical or short or whatever else it is. And then saying, look, if that's the case, I apologize. I'm sorry about that. You don't always need to add the apology bit, but I find it's often quite helpful. It's saying, look, I'm sorry for my part in this problem. This encourages the other person to think reciprocally, and if they're seeing you being willing to take responsibility, then it opens the door for them to safely also take responsibility for their part in the situation. If they encounter you as just being critical, well, guess what? You're probably just going to get some criticism back in your face in return. So we name the issue. The second step is taking some responsibility. And then the third step is shifting the focus towards the future and to the solution in a very simple, high-level way. So I might say something like, hey, I just don't want things to continue in this way. I'm hoping that things can start to improve, or I'd like for things to start to improve, or I'm hoping we can get on the same page moving forward, or I'd love to find a chance to clarify our expectations and make sure we're on the same page, or, I'm hoping that this tension will I guess, not be a problem that we have to deal with anymore. It's just trying to find a way to say something like, I'm hoping that things can be better. I'd like things to be better. And then I guess it's finding some way to describe what that would look like from your perspective. I'm hoping that maybe we can find a way to work together a bit more seamlessly. I'm hoping some of the stress can be reduced. Maybe we can find a way to just find that balance between giving each other space and also finding time to connect. It's just outlining, well, this is what I'm hoping we can work towards, and finding, again, it's a mutual way of phrasing that. And then the fourth step is just to ask a question and give them the ball in the conversation. Let them speak. Hey, I don't know, maybe I'm misreading things. What's your take on the situation? And we just ask them, what do you make of it? What's your perspective? They might agree with us and say, yeah, things have been crap. They might say, I've got no idea what you're talking about. They might start criticizing us. Maybe they're upset and have been bottling up some frustration. And us saying, hey, I don't think things have been great between us. What do you think? They might immediately jump in and say, well, yeah, you've been a bit of a jerk lately. And so we would do our best to acknowledge that without agreeing or disagreeing. Just, okay, look, thanks for letting me know. Actually, I wondered if maybe that was what was going on. Or it's not surprising. Or actually, I am. I'm actually a little bit surprised to hear that. I didn't know that was how you were feeling. And then again, we just continue from there to keep the conversation on the future. What would I need to do to make you feel a little bit more comfortable with the decisions I'm making? I'm wondering what would be the main things you'd like to hear from me, so that you knew that I was taking this seriously and that your perspective was valued and acknowledged, if that was the thing that they were upset about. It's just continuing to move towards that planning phase. We've named the problem, hopefully short-circuiting it. We've taken some responsibility. We've set up the stage to talk about the future and then given them the opportunity to speak. Whatever they come back with, our role then is just acknowledge, and then let's work together collaboratively to shift things moving forward. So for Megan, in her situation, I guess you might find a way to talk to that other staff member that's in your team and saying something like, look, it feels like things have been a bit tense between us lately. What's your take on the situation? I know I've probably come across as a little bit short. It's a challenging thing for me to find the right balance now that I'm in this team leader role, and I'm sure I don't always get it right. And so when that's affected you, I really do apologize for that. The last thing I want is for this to continue to be an extra problem that we need to deal with. I mean, gosh, we're already so busy around here. I'm wondering maybe what we could do, what you need from me, so that things can start to be more positive moving forward. What do you think? So Megan would have a different style to me. With different people, you'd use different words. But that's the general principle. And even from some of those phrases that I've used, there might even be some different bits and pieces that are useful for Megan. And for other people listening to the podcast as well, I hope that that's been helpful for you too. If you've got a question, you can shoot me an email. It's podcast@simongood.com. Otherwise, all the best dealing with whatever the conflicts are that you're navigating, at least in the short term, in your work and personal and professional lives as well. Bye for now.